Chapter 7. Daniel makes the next move. TC was waiting for Spencer in front of the Time Bandits headquarters just as they had planned. He stood a bit awkwardly holding the toolbox in one hand and the lunchbox in the other as Spencer came rushing out of the building with a frenzied, wild-eyed expression. "Hold up there, Spencer. Are you okay, my friend?" Gasping for air, Spencer managed to stammer out a shaky reply. I'm not sure. I think so, TC, but I might have ruined our plan. I let it slip that we were here for Daniel." TC's expression grew sober at this news, and as his keen gray eyes carefully surveyed the front of the office building, he put his finger up to his lips signaling for silence. Without a word, TC then handed the lunchbox over to Spencer and with a silent wave gestured for Spencer to follow him. Following after TC then as stealthily as he could, Spencer held his breath as two large broad-faced men noisily exited the dingy coffee shop across the street. Fortunately, the men showed no interest in TC and Spencer, but it was not until they had gotten safely out of hearing range about a block away from the Time Bandits headquarters that TC finally spoke again. "I think I got through to Daniel, at least I hope so. It's a mighty good thing, though, that we got to him when we did." Spencer, he had not eaten anything substantial for at least 2 days, only bread and water. Spencer stopped in his tracks and stared at TC wide-eyed. "That must be all that Sophia has had to eat today then." TC pointed to the lunchbox in Spencer's hand. "I gave Daniel enough food for both of them along with a master key to unlock both of their cells." Spencer visibly relaxed and let out a sigh of relief. "That is great, TC. You really thought of everything." Spencer's face lit up cheerfully then for just a moment before he looked at TC with a crestfallen expression. "Oh, but I tipped off the Time Bandit about our plan to get to Daniel. Surely, I messed everything up for us." TC waited to respond as they were now approaching the entrance to the nearly deserted train depot. The sun was just starting to set for the day, and it cast a soft yellowish glow around them as they boarded Old Destiny. As they stepped back onto the train, Spencer was still looking crestfallen as he handed the lunchbox back over to TC, who opened it right away and brought out 2 remaining sandwiches. They were both hungry after all the excitement, and TC addressed Spencer's concerns between mouthfuls as they ate. "I don't think we can be sure that the Time Bandit, knowing we were there for Daniel, has messed anything up. What I believe we do know for certain, my friend, is that the next move is now up to Daniel." Spencer hesitated in mid-bite of his sandwich and frowned. "That's what I am worried about, TC. The Time Bandit hypnotized me or something, and I don't even believe in that stuff. All I know is that I could hear myself telling him that we were there for Daniel, and man, after that he tore off running." TC nodded soberly. "I am worried too, Spencer. It is never easy dealing with these Time Bandits, and to tell you the truth, my friend, even the best of plans can go awry." TC pulled a handkerchief out from his front pocket then and began mopping his brow. "I am thinking that Daniel has surely learned a thing or two about the Time Bandit by now, and so all we can do, at least for the moment, my friend, is wait. Thankfully I did have enough time to properly introduce myself to Daniel and to let him know that the Time Bandit was keeping Sophia in the next cell. I also told him she has temporary amnesia and might not remember him. All we can do now is hope that Daniel has come to his senses about this dangerous crowd he has fallen in with." Spencer frowned again, looking even more worried and troubled than before. "I really hope Daniel has come to his senses too, but what bothers me is what Daniel did to Sophia in the first place. How can we trust him to do right by her now?" TC sighed heavily. "I am mighty worried about that too, my friend. Unfortunately, at this moment, we have no way of really knowing how Daniel will deal with the Time Bandit, or if he will do right by Sophia." Throwing down his half-eaten sandwich in frustration, Spencer anxiously jumped up out of the passenger seat. "Oh man, I hate this waiting. What if Daniel hasn't come to his senses, TC? What do we do then?" TC regarded Spencer kindly. "I have faith that he has in fact by now come to his senses, my friend, and this is why I instructed Daniel to wait until nightfall and then use the key I gave him to open both their cells. I also gave him directions to the train depot and let him know that you and I would be waiting here for them as soon as they can get away. Upon hearing the details of TC*'s plan, Spencer let out a sigh of relief and hoped fervently that TC was right. Meanwhile, back at the Time Bandits headquarters, all Daniel could do was think about getting away. Keeping an anxious eye out for nightfall, he shook his head regretfully and wondered how he was going to muster up the courage to face Sophia after what he had done. He had been such a fool, and after all his foolishness Candace had led him right into a trap. She had seemed so mysterious and exciting, and so different from Sophia, who had always struck him as very sensible and practical. Daniel managed a somewhat wry laugh at his own expense, and at the irony of it all. Almost immediately after breaking his engagement to Sophia, Candace had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, and standing at her side was the strangest person Daniel had ever laid eyes on, a person Candace only vaguely introduced as her guardian. Daniel had thought it peculiar at the time, but he was so smitten with Candace that he had just gone along with it without question. Daniel laughed out loud again, but more ruefully this time, as he realized that Candace had betrayed him just as he had betrayed Sophia. He remembered the guardian as Candace called him, reaching out to shake his hand, and then there was a sharp stinging sensation on his palm, and after that he had only the vaguest recollection that he was losing consciousness. When he had finally come to, he had the worst headache of his life, and found himself locked up here in this wretched cell. It had been a full day before Candace's guardian had even paid him a visit, and Daniel had demanded in a loud and angry tone that he be released immediately. However, Candace's guardian had merely laughed at him spitefully and left. Someone else had entered the cell much later then and rudely threw down a plate with some bread on it and a cup of water. That was the last time Daniel could remember seeing his jailer or anyone else, that is until earlier that afternoon when he had heard a loud racket at the window, followed, much to his surprise, by a visit from a man who called himself a time conductor and claimed to know Sophia. The man or time conductor, whatever that was, had hastily explained that Sophia was also being held right in the next cell. The time conductor then handed him a master key to both cells, and then, much to Daniel's relief, he gave him food. It had all happened so quickly that Daniel's head was still spinning, but he basically knew what he had to do. Although Daniel had not quite understood the time conductor's explanation of who Candace's guardian really was, he did know very well now that he was an enemy that he and Sophia needed to get as far away from as possible. It had been only a moment or two after the time conductor had made a hasty retreat that Candace's guardian burst into Daniel's cell without warning. His gray coat was all askew and he was frazzled and out of breath. At the sight of him, Daniel made an effort to compose himself quickly, and attempting to keep his expression as neutral and uninterested as possible, he thrust his hands that held the food given to him by the time conductor behind his back. He was relieved to have had the presence of mind to more fully close the window, and he fervently hoped that his jailer would not think to examine it more closely. The time bandit narrowed his eyes as he slowly scanned every inch of the cell before speaking. "Has anyone? Or what I mean to say is..." The time bandit glanced over at the window suspiciously and Daniel held his breath. "Has anyone other than myself recently visited you in this cell?" With a great deal of effort Daniel pushed back his anger at Candace's guardian, and he answered as nonchalantly as he could. "What do you mean? Can't you see I'm starving here, and the only people I have seen at all are those two goons who brought me bread and water when you first locked me up? Why have you locked me up, by the way, and where is Candace?" There was an awful moment when Daniel was not sure he had pulled it off. Candace's guardian could have spied the food he was hiding behind him, or simply asked why his hands were behind his back. He also could have noticed that the window was now slightly off its hinges, but whatever the reason, Candace's guardian had only spun around on his heel and grunted out an order. "Don't get any funny ideas about escaping. I have a guard right outside and he will be there all night." Daniel gritted his teeth in frustration. The time conductor had given him no help or instruction about how to deal with a guard right outside his cell. He could get out by the window now if he had to, but that still left him with the problem of how to get to Sophia. Daniel slumped down onto the floor of the cell and leaned his head back against the wall to think. Nightfall was fast approaching, and he knew he had to do something quickly. After a few tense moments he finally decided to climb out the window of the cell and take the chance that there would be no guard posted at the front door of the building. Having made up his mind, Daniel jumped to his feet and made sure that the key from the time conductor was still tucked securely away in his pocket. He then pushed on the window of the cell until it opened wide and tossed the paper bag with the food for Sophia out ahead of him. The climb out of the window was easy for him, and as he lightly landed on the grass the cool night air splashed his face. The paper bag was lying on the grass directly underneath the window, and he quickly grabbed it and headed for the front of the building. As soon as he neared the well-lit entrance, he craned his neck forward and seeing that no guard was posted there he made a run for it. Darting up to the front double doors he grabbed the handles, and as fortune would have it, he discovered that they were still open. Marveling at his continued good fortune he slipped inside the building and immediately spotted a long hallway that he suspected would lead him to Sophia's location. Without a sound he glided down the hallway until he reached an adjoining shorter hallway and turned right. He soon came upon a large room full of filing cabinets as well as a messy desk loaded up with stacks of papers. In the center of the stacks of papers there sat a rather portly man who was slumped over with his head on the desk and snoring loudly. Daniel continued on past the sleeping man, who he could only hope was the guard, and headed for the first cell further on back in the room. He then pressed his back into the wall and slowly inched his way closer and closer until he was standing directly in front of Sophia's cell. At that same moment Sophia, who was inside the cell, sat shaking miserably on the dank, cold floor. Her legs were stiff from sitting so long, and she was so cold that she could not stop shivering. Wishing she had her anorak jacket, she sadly wondered what had happened to it since she did not have it with her. Suddenly every muscle in her body tensed up as she heard someone directly outside the cell. Standing up as quickly as she could, she walked over to the cell door and pressed her ear up against it. What she heard made her gasp out loud in relief and surprise. "Sophia, it's me, Daniel. I hope you remember me. I am about to open the door, and I need you to stay calm, okay?" Sophia's heart began to thump wildly at the thought of rescue and seeing Daniel again. Trying to stay calm just as Daniel had suggested, she whispered back, "Daniel, yes, I remember. Thank God you are here." Suddenly there was an alarmingly loud clanging of the key in the lock, and Sophia took a step back as Daniel opened the door. For a moment they stood staring at each other without a word, and as Sophia gazed into Daniel's eyes she was surprised at what she saw. His eyes were no longer distant or guarded as they had been the last time they were together. Instead she now noted regret and remorse in them, and she knew right away that he was sincerely sorry. Daniel took a hesitant step toward her. "Sophia, I am so sorry." Hearing him apologize brought on an unexpected wave of pain, and she raised her hand to stop him. "Please, Daniel, not now. Please. Let's just get out of this awful place, and we can talk more later." Daniel shook his head in agreement and reached for her hand, which Sophia gently withdrew. "I will be right behind you, don't worry." Daniel shook his head again and waved for her to follow. Her heart beat wildly as they crept past a heavy-set man who had his head on the big desk in the room and was snoring loudly. Sophia said a quick prayer of thanks that there were no alarms going off, especially as they were reaching the adjoining hallway that led straight to the front entrance. With freedom now close enough that she could almost taste it, Sophia had to force herself to keep pace with Daniel and not run wildly out the front door. Her palms were sweating, and she was lightheaded with anticipation as Daniel reached out and swung open the double doors. When at last they stepped out into the fresh night air, Sophia was so excited and exhausted that she lost her balance and stumbled. Daniel, who had been watching her closely, took her arm and steadied her. "I have food for you, Sophia." Sophia noticed then that Daniel was holding a small paper bag and nodded. "I know I really do need to eat, Daniel, and I am definitely hungry. But let's get far away from here first." In the back of her mind Sophia was alarmed at how easy and familiar it was already starting to feel between them again. She could only wonder if this was why she did not protest when Daniel picked her up in his arms, as though it were the most natural thing in the world for him to do, and began to run. She was so exhausted that she did not try to resist, and she was not sure how long or far he ran because she somehow and impossibly fell fast asleep. When she did come to again, she looked around her in alarm until she spotted Daniel sitting only a short distance from her. "Where are we, Daniel?" Daniel did not answer right away, but instead walked over to her and gave her the paper bag with the food. She was nearly sick with hunger now, but after the first few bites she started to feel much better. Daniel waited until she finished the entire sandwich before answering her question. "We are hopefully very close to a train depot." Sophia gave him a puzzled look. "A train depot? How odd. I know I was drugged, Daniel, and that is why I can't remember anything that happened right after our breakup. It's all a blank. I remember being at the picnic table with you, and then all I can remember after that is waking up in that horrible cell. I must have somehow lost only the past day or so, because of course I remember you. I also overheard a curious conversation outside my cell that let me know I apparently have a couple of new friends who I now cannot remember." Daniel nodded. "Yes, and I think they must be good friends, Sophia, because at least one of them, who calls himself a time conductor, sure did go to a lot of trouble to help both of us. He tried to explain to me what a time conductor does, but I must admit, Sophia, that I did not understand it. He is the one, though, who broke through my cell window, gave me a key to both our cells and enough food for the both of us. He also gave me directions to a nearby train depot and said that it was of the utmost importance that we meet up with him there." Sophia sighed in frustration. Whoever had kidnapped her must have wanted her to forget who this time conductor was, and that alone was enough to convince her that this time conductor person must be someone very important. A sense of urgency came over her then, and as she surveyed the area around them more closely, she reasoned that it must be a park, although not a very nice or well-kept one. There were a few sycamore trees scattered here and there, and Sophia was now sitting with her back up against one of them. "I think, Daniel, that I heard this time conductor talking with the horrid man who kidnapped us, and they were having an argument or something just outside my cell, and I definitely got the impression that not only does this time conductor know me, but that we are already good friends." Daniel nodded in agreement. "Try not to worry too much, Sophia. This time conductor friend of yours said that you should get your full memory back soon, and hopefully you will remember him then. I am also pretty sure I was drugged too, by the way, but it must have been with something different, because I did not lose my memory like you did." Sophia hoped fervently that Daniel was right, because she very much wanted to remember. With a sudden shiver she drew her knees and closer to her torso for warmth. "This time conductor really does sound so interesting, Daniel. And I wonder how I met him." Daniel's mood seemed to change abruptly, and he cringed. Suddenly he looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time since they had reconnected. "I have no idea how you met him, and he did not seem to have time to tell me all that much. All I do know with certainty is that I really blew it, Sophia. I was awful to you, especially after all we have been to each other. Can you ever forgive me?" Sophia grew uncomfortable herself then, and she swallowed nervously. "It's not really a matter of forgiveness, Daniel. I can forgive you, of course, but nothing is the same now. I'm not the same and you're not the same, and as painful as it is for me to face it or to say it out loud, I don't think you would have fallen for someone else if you had truly been in love with me." Sophia did not at all like feeling the awful pang of heartbreak again, but she was still glad that she had said it out loud for both their sakes. Daniel was silent for a few seconds until he leaned down to pick up a handful of stones and started throwing them high up into the air one by one. "I deserve it, Sophia, I know I do, and I know you probably won't believe me, but I do still love you." Sophia stood to her feet and faced Daniel. "I just can't understand what happened to us, Daniel. It's like you were an entirely different person back at the picnic table, someone I did not know at all and had never known. And so now I really have no clue how to move forward from here, except that I don't think I much like the person I had become in our relationship, and I can't. I won't go back to being that person." Daniel stopped throwing the stones and gazed earnestly into Sophia's eyes. "That's just the thing, Sophia. You have always been so stable and practical and there for me, and I took it all for granted. I took you for granted, and it is my fault, Sophia, not yours. I know this isn't fair to you, but I want you back. I made a terrible mistake." Sophia's breathing became labored, and her heart started beating unbearably fast. Then without a word and without thinking it through, she pivoted on her heel and began running away from Daniel as fast as she could. All she could see as she ran was a dark blur of endless grassy expanse as it stretched out before her, and even though she was gasping for breath and nearly stumbled several times on broken branches, she kept running. She did not slow down until she finally heard Daniel, who had apparently been running close behind her the whole time, come up alongside her. Gasping for breath, she stopped running and stood clutching her side, which now had a painful stitch in it. Daniel was also out of breath as he took her arm and turned her around to face him. "I can't believe you did that, Sophia. What were you thinking?" Sophia waited to answer until the pain in her side eased up enough so that she could stand up straighter. "I'm not exactly sure why I did that, Daniel. It was an impulse." Daniel stared at her wide-eyed. "I tell you that I still love you and you run in the opposite direction." Literally. Sophia was at a loss for words as she stared back at him. "Please, Daniel, do we have to try and sort this all out right now?" Daniel slowly and hesitantly let go of her arm and apologized. "I'm sorry again, Sophia. I keep making mistakes. Of course, now is not the right time for any of this. What we should be focusing on is getting to the train depot and meeting up with this time conductor." Relieved that Daniel did agree, Sophia nodded. "We can talk more about us later for sure, Daniel. I just hope that my running did not take us further away from the train depot." Although it was now nearly pitch dark outside, Sophia's run had mercifully brought them to a lone street lamp that shone just brightly enough to reveal a nearby street. Pausing to read the street sign, Daniel suddenly broke out into a grin. "Wow, what a bit of luck for us. I think you actually brought us closer to it, Sophia. I am pretty sure that is Parsons Avenue. The street that the time conductor said would take us directly to the train depot."